Hello, and I just thought I would go through a few things that you can do as a console owner to help performance on the console. It's a bit more difficult with consoles because a lot of it's memory related, because obviously the developers have already, ported the game using the hardware of the console in question. So graphically, it's already been set up. So the texture detail, the draw distance, the lighting effects, the any other super duper effects that they use has all already been turned on and off and whatever. So the only thing you can really do as a console owner is probably look at things like your monitor that you've got, your TV you've got, your console's resolution. But let's before we go down that road, let's have a look at what it's like, what the game can do for you. So let's go through the general stuff. So if we look at the general stuff, the first thing you can see is we've got display mode. Display mode's 4K. Now, what that actually means is that it's pushing 4K visuals. So it doesn't matter what resolution the console's in, whether it's in 1920 by 1080, whether you've got it in 2K, whether you've got it in 4K, it will always try and push the 4K visuals. The other option you've got is HD. Obviously, that offers a lower resolution quality texture into the game. Now, you would think that that would make your game run better. I guess it does for the most part, but unfortunately, it's not. It looks. If you've got a 4K, if you're trying to run it on a 4K monitor, it looks terrible. If you're on a HD monitor, it might not look as bad. But you can, if you have got an HD monitor, you can actually use the 4K visuals and it downsamples, and it does look pretty good. But let's have a look at the things that you can turn off. You can turn off volumetric fog, because obviously that takes a lot. You can turn off motion blur. You can turn that off, but I'm going to be quite honest. It takes a bit of getting used to, and I haven't noticed a mass amount of difference in performance at all when I've turned that off. So those are the three obvious things you can do. You can turn off all the bits and pieces that you see on the screen. So, you know, you can, I mean, I don't have the hood on anyway, but obviously turn the hood off. You could turn off, you can turn the lighting effects off, your arcing spark effects. These are small things which you probably don't see much. Change your hood type, you turn your scores. Obviously, I don't have the hood on anyway, but even if you got it on, you might want to reduce what's on the screen because it's all part of the GUI. It's all part of the graphics user interface. Hood and gameplay, turning off all the markers because they are, again, they're visuals on the screen that have to be generated by the console. Yes, okay, if you F1 or you hold the, sorry, if you hold the start button or whatever the option is on your console or PC, they'll disappear anyway. But if you turn them off as part of your game, that helps with the visuals. It reduces the amount of visuals that you see on the screen. There isn't, to be fair, there isn't a lot else you can actually do in the settings within Tracing World to help the performance other than what I've just said. So let's have a look at other things you can do. If we go to, it depends on what console you've got, because if you've got a PS4 Pro or an Xbox One or Xbox S, I think some layers are already turned off, but you can control the layers. So if you do have a console that you can control layers on, or then if you go into, we'll use the new route as an example. If you go in, you can actually control what layers. So you can turn off static formations. You can turn off the class 710 because I've got that. You turn off the class 390 if you wanted to. Now, let's say you weren't bothered about having the 710 running around. It's one less thing that needs loading into the system. What if you weren't bothered about the 390s coming in? Let's say you just want to crack on and you can turn the 390s off because that's less trains, less layers. And if you don't want like all the freight trains and things lying around in the sidings, these are things that you can turn off to help the memory be freed up to help the game run better, to help the route run better. So they're things that you can do from off the bat that you can do. Now, another thing you can do, just talking about the add-on and the layers and the memory, is that if you are going to spend a considerable amount of time in a route, if you go into the route and have a general play around with it, going up and down it, you'll find the more you play it, the sort of better it gets. You'll never get rid of buffering. Buffering is the loading of the objects, of the trains, of the textures and everything like that. You'll never get rid of that, but it will reduce the time in which it has to do it, because the cache holds the memory of all the objects, the textures, and everything like that. Now, again, yes, you've got less layers, that's less for it to hold. And obviously, the faster you go, the more it has to work. Now, another thing I do when I load up is I load up, when I do the weather, I don't necessarily, I don't use dynamic weather at all. As nice as it is, as good as it is, I don't use it, because you end up having fog all the time, or it's raining, which is great and it looks lovely, but it all affects the performance of the game. You've got to remember that the developers have so much limitation in what they can and can't do within the graphics engine that's provided to them, and they have to learn how to use that graphics. If they're trying to push out as much as they can, it will affect performance. So I always have custom, and I always have, I say always have, for not Moodamine, I will always put high cloud level. And the reason why I do that is because what happens is you have, it takes away the shadows. It takes, for the most part, it takes away your lighting. As lovely as the lighting is, with the sun shining through, casting shadows of the trees and the buildings on the track, and obviously it has to draw the lighting and the shadows forward. Well, if you take that away, that's one less thing for you to worry about, isn't it? It's one less thing for you to worry about. It's one less thing that you need to do. So you end up having a smoother experience. Let's just do a quick. Let's quickly go out there. So you end up. It might look a bit drab, but I can't go any further. Okay. Thought I could go a bit further than that. It might look a bit drab, but at the end of the day, you end up with an experience that means that you are just concentrating on that. That's just all the safety systems being turned on. I'm just going to give you a quick example. I'm not going to drive it all the way. I'm just going to give you a quick example of what that looks like. So driving the hood off, obviously that's one less thing to worry about on the screen. But yes, changing the weather, it certainly does that indeed. So layers, the weather, obviously driving in the dark, driving in the snow, because obviously the snow textures are a lot better visually. They're smoother, there's not as much detail on them, so actually driving in the snow without the snow runs better. In the dark runs better, because if it's dark you can't see all the textures, so it just runs in the dark. Not quite as much fun, I guess, but it's definitely something. It's definitely something to consider. So yeah, those are little things like that you can turn off. I know it sounds silly, and it will make some difference. The biggest difference for me, though, if I'm completely honest, is I changed my console resolution. I'm running on a 4K Samsung QLED TV, which has got the VRR, there's a variable refresh rate, it's got the automatic latency monitoring, the ALM, it's got game mode. I'm speeding. It's got 120 hertz. Now, Train Sim World isn't 120 hertz compatible anyway. So, so yeah, it might look a bit drab, but you know what? As you can see already, you haven't got that draw of shadows as much, which means that it does tend to run a bit smoother, especially in those built-up areas like you do in London, like around Willesden, Wembley, as you're coming out of London. So you do get that. You do get that. To me, it appears smooth, and I think also putting it in the 2K console resolution with the 4K visuals, I don't notice much difference in the visuals at all. So when I've looked, you'll be watching this video in HD anyway, but I don't notice the difference in the visuals at all between looking at it in 4K and looking at it in 2K. Maybe maybe it might be just slightly not as sharp, but I have to admit it still looks stunning, and I'm happy with it. As long as it runs better, I'm happy with it. So that's sort of where I'm going with that. Let's speed it up a bit, but yeah, I'm very happy to run it into game. So that's kind of where I'm going with it. That's sort of my setup, and I've noticed that does run better. Ultimately, it's like I said before, if you do a shift, run around the routes a little bit, you'll also find that the things will load in a lot quicker. I have actually already been running this route earlier. Whether it's saved all that, I don't know yet. That could be another factor to why it's running quite a bit smoother than it probably would. But yeah, so that's my sort of 10 penneth in how I feel you could improve your performance if you feel you're having problems with the performance in general of the game on the console. Obviously, PS4 and Xbox One owners, it's obviously a bit harder, but you can use these. You could use these methods if you wanted to help that as well. So that's kind of it, really. There's not much else you can really do other than you can't do much with your memory. You can't do much with where you. I mean, I save all my TSW and all the routes on the console storage on my PS5 completely separately to anything else, so it's exclusively saved. Does it make a difference? I don't know. It probably makes it load more efficient, but obviously that's loading the game itself. So yeah, so for me that's probably all I can really say to you. So I hope that, I mean, it might seem like pretty obvious things, but there's really not much else you can do without, the limitations that the hardware gives you, that the developers have, means that this is what happens. So, I mean, all you've got to understand is if you've got everything conned, you've got all the weather doing what it's got to do, you've got the draw distance doing what it's doing, then do with it. The other thing I could suggest, if you're a PS5 owner and you want it to be really smooth, is play the PS4 version. Now, obviously, if you're playing the PS4 version, you've got to be aware that the graphic quality will be slightly less, as they're slightly lower resolution textures, but also the draw distance is slightly less. But if you've got it in cloudy mode, you won't notice that as much. But again, that's just another variation. And also, the layers are taken off on that anyway. So you'll probably find that some of that was automatic. They're just little suggestions. So I just hope you found that useful. Okay.